War in Ukraine is proving extraordinarily deadly for Russian troops and not just the rank and file. As the Washington Post reports, Russian generals are being aggressively targeted by Ukrainian forces and killed at a rate not seen since World War II. They're being picked off by snipers in close combat and in bombings. Ukrainian officials say their forces have killed 7 generals alongside more senior Russian army and naval commanders in just 4 weeks of combat. Meanwhile, Russia's communication systems are failing at a higher than expected rate. That's forcing invading troops to rely on open systems that can be readily intercepted by Ukrainian forces. According to new reporting in Foreign Policy, Ukrainian units are exploiting Russia's lack of communications to jam and interfere with tactical messages, and in some cases even pinpointing the location of Russian general officers for snipers that have been trained by Western militaries over the past 8 years. Ukrainians have been preparing for this. Joining us now, the reporters behind those pieces, London bureau chief for the Washington Post, William Booth, and national security and intelligence reporter at Foreign Policy, Amy McKinnon, also with us, the host of Way Too Early and White House bureau chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire. Katty Kay and Richard Haass are with us as well. Richard, just overall looking at the map and Russia's gains and lack thereof, I think one thing we can agree on is this was unexpected on the part of Vladimir Putin to be in this position right now.
No, absolutely. If you look at that map, Mika, and you put a clock over it, what you see is basically from 12 through 6 going clockwise. That's where the Russian positions are. And the idea that they would move into the center or west has essentially been stymied. And the question, and William would be the perfect person to address it, is whether now essentially we've had the signals, this is what the Russians have said, we can't do better than this, so we're going to hold this, and whether he thinks that they are seeing this as something to trade diplomatically or just to freeze this in place, that this essentially becomes their new definition of victory.
William?
In terms of where the Russians want to go in freezing their operations, I don't have great eyes on that. I have great eyes on the generals that were killed. I think
William, let me ask you about that, because I'm going to read a line from your piece that I think is fascinating. It's just one more line, and it's the reported high attrition rate from Russian commanders in Ukraine underscores the problem of invading the country on a false set of assumptions, expecting to swiftly topple Ukraine's government and install a puppet regime to bring it back to Moscow's orbit. Why was that damning?
Well, I think they assumed that they were going to go in and take Kiev very quickly and that they would be well accepted. The problem is that they've been stalled over the last 4 weeks, and they've been fought very hard by the Ukrainian forces. And the point of our piece just the other day was that these 7 generals were hit. Some were targeted or certainly unlucky, and that the Ukrainian forces are looking to stop the command and control units that are at the front of the advances of the Russian forces. And they've been pretty effective.
Yeah. And also the casualties that Russia has endured in this. Is this something that's surprising to them? And how does that impact their thinking on the strategy? Does it bother them, or do they just pull in more troops?
I think their casualties have been maybe astounding, very, very high. NATO officials briefed reporters in Europe last week when Biden came that there were 7,000 to 15,000 Russian troops killed. That is a lot of people. That is way higher attrition rates than we're seeing in some of the worst weeks in Chechnya, and the Russians didn't lose that many people in Georgia, and you know, Afghanistan was a many long-year war. So this is a high level, and a lot of senior commanders killed.
So, Amy, you write in Foreign Policy, the Ukrainians are listening. Russia's military radios are getting owned. And you write in part this: Ukraine's security service, the government's main counterintelligence arm, has intercepted dozens of calls among Russian soldiers, their higher units, and relatives. In one captured call, a Russian soldier told his mother that his unit had indiscriminately shelled a 5-story apartment building and that many troops dreamed of fleeing the battlefield. Other troops admitted on intercepted calls that their units were exaggerating their strength in reports back to the Russian Defense Ministry. Amy, talk to me about on how many different levels this is crushing to Russia's morale, but also shows us how not only resilient but resourceful the Ukrainians are in this battle.
Well, I think the first thing that these intercepts speak to is just how unprepared the Russian forces were to be sent over the border into Ukraine to start this war. You know, we know from these intercepts that many of these soldiers, many of whom are incredibly young, were very confused as they were being sent into Ukraine. Many were only given 24 hours notice, and they didn't have the time required to exchange the kind of encryption keys that they need to make sure that they can speak over secure lines with their comrades as they were heading into Ukraine. And it's not just the Ukrainian intelligence services that are listening in. It's anybody, it's ham radio enthusiasts, it's reporters, it's analysts, it's anybody with a bit of time and technology to get connected to these radios can listen, because they are speaking in some instances over walkie-talkies and clear. And there's also been reports that they're using Ukrainian cell phones. And if you're in Ukraine using a Ukrainian cell phone, you can bet that Ukrainian intelligence services are going to find their way into that.
Absolutely.
Jonathan Lemire, terrific reporting there. Give us a little more, if you would, about the implications of the Ukrainians being able to listen in on these communications, and more so, perhaps just a broader look to just how terrible the Russian equipment has been right now, that they have had real issues with equipment breaking down, supply chains being outstretched, and being unable to use what Western officials had thought would be their advantages.
Amy?
Amy?
Oh, sorry. Well, I mean, this speaks to the failures that the Russians have had across the board and how unprepared they were going in. And I think these intercepts are going to be incredibly important when it comes to war crimes trials at some point in the future. Based on what the Russians have been saying across these lines, it does appear that they are openly and knowingly targeting civilian infrastructure. And that's the kind of thing which investigators will be looking very closely at when it comes to future war crimes tribunals.
Katty Kay, jump in.
William, I wanted to ask you more about the generals and what you think that means in terms of morale of the troops, how that message may be getting back to Putin. Because one of the questions, I think, as we go forward and we look at what the Russian strategy might be going forward is how much reliable information is Vladimir Putin himself actually getting? Do we know that he sees the war as we are seeing the war? Do we know whether he is seeing the losses? Do we know whether he is seeing the loss of some of these generals? What's your understanding from your reporting on whether the deaths of these generals may be getting through to the Kremlin and what that might mean?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The message of the Russian generals being targeted and killed is certainly getting across through social media and in Ukraine to Ukrainians. So it bolsters Ukrainian troops, and it helps civilian populations withstand the barrage they're under. In terms of what messages are reaching Vladimir Putin on any given day, I don't really know. The loss of so many senior officers, though, has to penetrate the Army Corps, and this is a well-known thing among them. It's very hidden by the Russians. It's not out in their public media. It's not being discussed. It's not on any availability on Russian media. But he has to know that these many people have been lost, and whether that affects their tactics going forward or affects his decision to go to ceasefire or to whatever else he does next is unclear. But it's a clear blow to lose these many senior officers in the field in 4 weeks of combat. It's just really brutal.
Amy, is there a significant story in the possibility that at the start of this war, that the Ukrainians, with the substantial assistance of Western intelligence agencies, amputated the command and control capacity of the Russian army?
They've certainly made a very good shot of that, as William's reporting, as William and his colleagues' reporting bears out. I mean, there's been a lot of surprises only 4 weeks into this war. The first, as I said earlier, is how unprepared Russian troops were. The second being how fiercely and how smartly the Ukrainian forces have fought. What they've done is they've played to their advantage. They are not engaging Russia out in the field in big battles where Russia just has the numbers to potentially overwhelm them. They've stuck mainly to urban areas where they have the advantage as the home team. They know the terrain. They've moved in small formations, and they're waging a war of attrition quite successfully, as this reporting on the deaths of senior Russian commanders attests to. Just picking off Russian troops one after another, undermining morale, and it's also going to start to very quickly undermine Moscow's ability in the field. And we're already starting to see some profound shifts in their tactics. You know, their initial goal of going into this appears to have been a lightning strike on Kiev with the expectation that it would collapse within a few days. That, of course, now looks incredibly elusive. What we saw on Friday in a speech from a senior Russian military commander is that they at least are alleging, let's see if this plays out in the field, because there's only so much you can take Russian officials' words at face value. But what they're saying now is that they're going to focus their fight on the east of Ukraine in the Donbass, and that they're going to start to focus on that as their next line of effort in the war.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.